PC. Every member of the team that has worked with the team that continue to work with the team, it's really a pleasure to be here. It's interesting to know that just not too long ago, I was also uh, selected as one of the top performers and awarded by TPC as well. Thanks that you all find my work uh, impressive and at the same time value adding to the organization. So I'm going to share my screen now. Kindly let me know if you see my screen. If you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's coming up. It's coming up. Yes, we can see it.
All right. So thank you so much. Thanks, Mo. Mo is like a brother that has turned or a friend that has turned brother now. We've been through call it the thick and thin. Huge impact you're making, and I really, really appreciate you. This is just to say thanks to everyone who is on the call. I have very short time. What Mo has done is to get me to speak on a topic conversation that usually takes about 3 days minimum to do it in 40 minutes and also take questions, especially realizing the fact that we have professionals on the call, business owners and entrepreneurs who are doing fantastically in their different sphere. But what I would try to do is to run through it. I'm sure the conversation doesn't end here. We can always sort of circle back and get things on going forward as well. So, the first thing I would like to do is to, and thanks once again for that wonderful introduction. At some point, I didn't know it was my bio I was listening to. I was wondering who were they describing. Let me quickly just show you what I think and I can help you do. And this is really, I'm really very passionate about this because branding is what I do. That is my life essentially. First, I'm going to help you move your performance to become one of the top tier performer within your industry. Basically. Secondly, what that would do essentially for you is also 3x your results as it's whether it's a business or personal brand. And thirdly, it's going to put you, Mo talked a little bit about in his introduction about the element of visibility. And it's not just visibility, it's visibility that converts, visibility that brings value. That is the kind of visibility I'm going to do. And the way I will do that is essentially help you to attract the people that has the value that is equivalent to the value that you create. One of the questions that keep coming up in every session I get into is people telling me, hey, I've got good products. I just left Abuja today and we had a session over the weekend and someone just said within that sentence, said, look, I'm a graphic designer. The quality of my job is far better than what other pay huge sum for. Even the guys who get the guys who are not as good as me wonder how much I get paid for those kind of jobs. So there are people pay premium for products that is less of quality compared to his, but yet he doesn't get that much value for his product, and that's purely a branding issue. Those are some of the things that we'll be looking at. So the question is, we want to talk about building a strong global brand. We want to talk about bringing a strong global, but let's quickly take a prescript. And this is where I want all of us to get a bit excited about it. So I need every one of us to be involved, essentially. That's what I'm trying to say. So, are you sure you're seeing can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your
Can
screen.
everyone see my screen? Just to be all right, all right. So it's a quick activity that I want us to get into quickly. Use your chat boxing. Arrange the below based on who is most important to the success of your business, with the most as your number one. So I'm going to be looking into the chat. So quickly, let's get into it. Arrange them showcasing which or aligning them in such a way that the most important to the criticality or the most critical to the success of your business is number one. Arrange them. Can we do that quickly? Let me look through the charts. FO, you can help me as well, please, so that we can be swift about this. Can you just quickly arrange them quickly, in the order which is most important, then on, up onto the list or down to the list important for you. I'm looking through the chart now to see.
thought leadership. Oh, what is okay? So
Top
I
leadership.
somebody is mentioning top leadership customers, then
Yeah.
staff.
Okay. I need us to all comment. I'm sure we have how many people do we have on the corner? 16. Come on, guys. Let's let's see your comment. Let's see your comment quickly, quickly. Top leadership, Omobolanle. Okay. That's like your number one. Top leadership. Okay, John, top leadership, middle leadership, shareholder, staff, customers. Fantastic. Now it's getting interesting. Precious customer, middle leadership, staff, shareholders, top leadership. Ah, okay. Interesting. All right. So I'm going to pack this. We'll come back to this. Let's take the second one quickly. Arrange the following based on the role that is most critical to the success of an organization. This, which is most critical. Abimbola, shareholders, top leadership, middle, staff, customer. Thank you. So exercise two, arrange them, which is most important, which is your number one, quickly. Okay. So just for context is because we know what CEO is. Some people might not know DMD. DMD is Deputy Managing Director. CMO is the Chief Medical Officer. CTO is the Chief Technology Officer. COO, of course, Chief Operation Officer. CBO is the Chief Brand Officer. CRO is the Chief Revenue Officer. CCO, yes, CCO is the Chief Control Officer as well. I think I missed out the CFO. Yeah, I missed out the CFO. But then let us quickly take a look at that. Okay, okay. Ngozi Ubuna, top leadership, middle leadership, staff, customer, shareholders. You're still on the previous one. All right, so let me progress. We'll be taking a look at your comments. So you can keep the comment coming in while we get on with the conversation, and we'll come back to this towards the end of it. Hopefully, we'll have enough time to be able to do it. Now, when you talk about branding, I know a lot of us will heard this terminology a lot: branding, brand, and all of that. What exactly does it mean? That might be an easy way to start it or to look at it, but maybe the way I want to look at it is first off to say, why bother about branding? I mean, you could have been spending your time, this precious time that you have now, talking about or doing some other things that you really don't that are much more important to you. But why would you bother about branding at this time? Why would you sit on a Zoom call just to talk about branding? I'm going to run you through a few things just to get those call them the premises out of the way, then we can get into the crux of the conversation. Number one, it's important for us to talk about branding because we live in a day and a new order that is being driven by the consumption appetite and the ideological construct, right, of a certain group of people that we now call the Gen Z, the Gen Alpha, and all of that. And it's important because if they are the ones bankrolling the economy that you are playing in, it's important that you have an understanding of the psychology that works in their head when it comes to decision making, when it comes to purchasing their purchasing pattern, and of course the kind of choices that they make. So it's important for you to understand that because that is essentially how you drive sales. So number one, it is important for us to talk about branding because we need to understand the consumption appetite and the ideological construct of the new order. Basically, the set of guys that are driving the new economy that you are playing in. The second bit of it is the element of the humanized brand versus the dehumanized brand. One of the things that I'm going to be rushing at because of the time I have. One of the things that I've noticed over time is the fact that In generations past, we've had brand reflected in a highly dehumanized way, or maybe less reflective. Let me use that word, less reflective of humanity. So what you find is, particularly in production, manufacturing, and all of that, it's easy for you to go on a website of a manufacturer. All you're going to find is the product. So if they're producing tractors, for instance, you're going to see the machines, you're going to see the different type of machines, you're going to see the different products that they have and things like that, but less of human touch. And one of the things that I've come to discover, discovered recently, is the fact that humanized brands attracts much more than brands that less reflect humanity. So the subject of humanity is at the center of every conversation that you must have if you must drive the economy, or if you must play at the top level that you are interested in. The third one is the fact that what branding does for you is to help you unearth the root of your business. It just opens up what your business is all about, essentially. It helps you unearth it. It gives you that understanding, the premises that is helping, that holds the structure of your business together, and how your business then survives going forward. It unveils your business insights, because one of the things that is very important when it comes to branding is essentially research. It requires a whole lot of research around the brand, research around the internal environment and the external environment of that brand, to be able to curate and design or sort of rebrand or refresh that brand in a direction in such a way that the brand is able to play at the top, right? So that is important. Branding helps to detect the culture of your organization. This is huge. Branding helps to detect the culture of your organization. What I'm going to try to do tonight is to sort of just bust a lot of myth and disabuse your mind as to what you understand branding to be, and you will begin to see things in a different light. So branding actually detects the culture of your organization. I remember Peter Drucker says that culture eats strategy for lunch. And a wise man will always say, if culture is strategy for lunch, then maybe sensible leaders should eat culture for breakfast. The third, or the next one, is the fact that productivity sits on your brand promise. So productivity and profitability of your organization is highly dependent or directly proportional to your brand promise. And your brand promise sits right in branding. Your brand promise is a direct reflection of the efficiency or effectiveness of your branding. The next one is the fact that perception versus reality. Today, we live in a world where perception is stronger than reality. That's essentially what branding does. Perception is stronger than reality. If you take a look at the Western world today, there is always this perception that the Western world is safer than the developed world. But the truth of the matter is not. The kind of crime that happens in some of these Western developed countries, it doesn't even happen here. That is the truth. But then they've been able to create a perception where if you commit a crime in US or in UK or any part of the world, or the developed world, you are going to most likely going to face the wrath of the law. And what that has done over time is to create a perception that safety and security is of utmost importance to such ecosystem. And that is essentially what happens there. So perception versus reality. Perception is stronger than reality, and because we live in a world where perception is stronger than reality, it's important for you to begin to think about branding. Branding helps to increase geometrically your brand assets, and there are a whole lot of research that goes into that. As a matter of fact, one of the research by Kanza Brands Analysis report reveals that organizations with strong brands outperform organizations with less brand strength. Organizations that invest in the branding, that are able to develop huge brand muscle, are able to outperform those with less focus on branding. As a matter of fact, they did years, over 14 years rather, and they realized that organizations, strong brands, were able to perform and generate profitability up to about 435% compared to S&P 500. Now, S&P 500 are organizations that basically determine the worth of the market, the market share in US. They determine the worth of the market in US. And those organizations include organizations like NVIDIA, Apple, and the likes. And that is essentially what happens. Guys, can you maybe
Did we just lose Ben? Ben, did we just lose you?
No, no, you didn't lose me. I actually asked for
Okay,
just a minute.
okay.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So you can hear me now, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can.
All right. So another part of the research, I mean, you can imagine that strong brands, right, or brands that invest in branding outperform S&P 500 organizations. That's huge. Secondly, we've also realized that from the research that the value of the intangible assets. So if you look at when they are doing brand valuation, the market value of a brand, the intangible asset is responsible for 72% of the value, the market value of a brand. The intangible asset of that brand is responsible for 72 of its market share or market value rather. So when you value a brand, let's say you value Apple, for instance, the intangible asset of Apple is responsible for 72% of that value of their worth, of the capital, whatever it is that business is worth. 72%. This is where it gets interesting. Branding is responsible for 40 to 75% of that 72%. So what it means is essentially that your organization sits, the determinant of the success of your organization up to 80% is branding. So this is basically just to bring the conversation to the fore and to help you understand that branding is much more important than the way a lot of organizations look at it. Of course, branding helps you to rethink and reimagine the future. When it comes to market differentiation, one of the things that branding does for you essentially as well is the fact that branding helps with your positioning. Mo also spoke to that earlier when we started, the element of positioning. And of course, branding helps with your storytelling. So I just quickly wanted to get this out of the way so that we can then begin to look at some of the things that are very, very, very important. But one thing I wouldn't leave before we get out of this particular segment is the fact that branding puts you in the light of sight of your potential clientele. So branding puts you in the light of sight of your potential clientele. And that's very, very important. It is the hook that builds your brand loyalty. I will talk about this in a moment. But one thing I will also mention is branding also helps to determine your business name. So what it means is if you've named your business and you've never considered branding, maybe you've done the wrong thing. That's how interesting it is. And I've just wrote MasterCard and American Visa right there. MasterCard does a lot more volume than American Visa just because of their name. A lot of people refuse to subscribe to American Visa because of the name American Visa. And that's just the difference. If you go into their numbers, what these guys are doing in the market, MasterCard does almost twice the volume of American Visa just because of the name. That is essentially an error due to lack of proper branding. So you see how important that as down to the name of your organization is important, and branding helps with that. Branding helps with your business communication plan. A lot of organizations don't have communication plan. All they do is just throw out information, not structured. Sometimes they think it's structured, but not properly structured because it is not complying with the rules of branding. And of course, one of the pivotal pillars of your identity, that is what branding is. One of your pivotal pillars of your identity. So I just quickly wanted to run through all of those so that we can then go into the conversation. So at this point, I want to just go through again. I'm sure a lot of us might begin to rethink what our choices were when it came to the kind of when it came to the last exercise I gave about CMO, COO, CTO, CEO, and the likes. So you can begin to see what it is. All right, so I'll just continue here and I'm just going to ask, would you want to learn how to build a global brand? If your answer is yes, then you are in luck. If your answer is yes, then essentially, all right, so let's get into it. This is where the conversation begins. A lot of leaders get into they get handed the responsibility to run a business. Some of them get into positions where they are so enthusiastic, they've got a passion, they got the idea, but they lack the tool that is required. And this is where we begin to look at branding as one of those essential tools. how to build a strong global brand. What are the tools that you need to look at? First is to look at the fundamentals. What branding is not. A lot of us have an idea of what branding is. Now want to begin to disabuse our mind. And this is how you start. What branding is not. Branding is not logo. Get it straight. Branding is essentially not logo. Sometimes some of these elements are part of it, but it's not what it's about. That is not the core of it. That is not the heart of it. That is not the fundamentals that is involved. Branding is not logo. The next one, branding is not signage. So it's not about you having a beautiful signage or signpost and fluttering or clustering the entire city, the major city with your banner, digital banner, flex banner, whatever. Branding is not signage. Branding is not packaging. Branding is not packaging. As a matter of fact, branding is not product sales. Branding is not, and I can go on and on and on. I remember in the session we had in Abuja, and when I was done, I then asked the members, the participants, so can you tell me what branding is? Then they said, well, what's else? Everything we thought branding is, you knocked them off the table. So right now, we don't know what branding is. So I'm just going to ask you guys, what do you think branding is really? I'm looking at the chat, or maybe if we are permitted, somebody can unmute and speak. What do you think branding is? It's interesting for you, to be interesting for you to know that I did a 3-day training on branding and we never talked about design. We never talked about design. We never talked about color psychology. We never talked about iconography design. That's to tell you how deep branding is. And that is to disabuse our mind as to what people know about branding. So will anybody unmute and speak? If all of this is not branding, then what is branding really? Does anybody have an idea? Or do you want to use the chat button? I have 15 people on the call. I think I can spare a few minutes on this. Let us stay on it a little bit. What do you think branding is? So I'm looking at the charts now. Yes, I see branding is the identity of a company. Curated and curated perception. Fantastic. All right, because of our time, this is where it gets interesting. Branding is a combination. As a matter of fact, when you talk about branding, what you are referring to is a result already. So what you should be focusing on is the input. So when you are talking about branding, you are already looking at the result on the outside. You're already looking at the impact. What you should be looking at is the machinery behind it. Branding at its core talks about, refers to your core values, the core values of your organization. Somebody said core services delivery, your core service delivery your business does that is unique to your organization. The other element is your culture, your strategy, your value promise, and most importantly, the story that you tell. This is what branding is. So branding is a summation of your core values, the culture, the strategy, the value promise, and lastly, the story that you tell about your brand. Branding is building a reputation. Simon, thank you very much. So Decker put it this way, it says, branding or brand is the identity and story of a company that makes it stand out from the competitors that sell similar products, right, and services. And branding is the process of creating the brand identity of a company. So whenever we have a conversation of branding, what you should have at the back of your mind is that we are talking about the creation of the brand identity of a company. Now, this is where the work begins. Do you know that branding is one of the subsets of the corporate identity of an organization or the identity of an individual? So it's actually not the only key factor. It's one of the subsets of it. And there are 3 key elements, or what I call the 3 key building blocks that make up the corporate identity of an organization. One is strategy. The second one is culture. And the third is your visual identity. So a lot of time when people begin to talk about branding, what they are focusing on under corporate identity is just one of the elements, visual identity, that speaks to the element of branding. So they are not even looking at the entire spectrum. It's just visual identity they're looking at. And that is not enough, because what happens is like having a building that is sustained, or a roof that is sustained by just one pillar when it's supposed to be sustained by three? Are you surprised why you don't get the kind of the results that you deserve, given the inputs that goes in? And this is how I like to show it. You could take your strategy, your culture, and your visual identity, see them like, barriers that are arranged, and you have a hole across, and you have arrows being shot. Those arrows, see them as your potential value interaction, essentially your customers interacting with your brand. This is your brand, this is your business ecosystem. So if you have a strategy that is effective, and you have a culture that is effective, but you have a visual identity that is misaligned, you are not going to get value converted. Your conversion rate will not be a direct reflection, will not be a reflection of your efforts. So your results will not reflect the effort that you have because there is a misalignment. Same way, if you have a strategy that is not fit for purpose, but you have a good culture and visual identity, you are also not going to convert. And if you have a strategy and visual identity that works, but you don't have a culture that works, you're also not going to convert. So what gives you the results that you desire? It's your strategy, the alignment between your strategy, your culture, and your visual identity. So branding is essentially looking at these three key elements and taking them holistically when you begin to address the subject of corporate identity, or maybe personal identity if it's a personal brand. Interestingly for me, across my 14-year career, going up to 15, I've worked on strategy, I've worked on culture, and I've worked on visual identity. And that's why I can speak holistically. I mean, for someone who privileged enough to be trained at the London Business School and of course at the Lagos Business School, and not just trained at the London Business School, being able to design and propose the strategy that is being adopted now by a lot of you might not know, Bag of Ethics, formerly known as Supreme Creation, one of the top tier fashion forward organization I've worked with, designed for Dior, designed for Nike, worked with British Airways and all of the strategy that myself and my team prepared and present is what they've adopted today, and they've refreshed their brand, and you cannot imagine the huge value they are raking in. And thanks to God that we got recognized for that and got a recommendation letter all the way from London Business School. So I like to think that I have an understanding of essentially what I'm talking about. And being able to manage an energy corporation worth over $13.2 billion, including the subsidiaries, then you can understand what I'm talking about when it comes, being able to manage the brand representation. So the element of culture is also tied into branding, and that is important for you to be able to, you need to understand that. And I'm not going to dive into it because culture is a whole, I'm sure more understands that culture is a whole body of work on its own. Right. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that organizational culture is the word. It is the most important factor in any organization. It supports and holds leadership strategic decision up the ladder of success. Because what usually happens is without culture or without effective culture in place, human tendencies will always creep in. And that is going to erode the value. As a matter of fact, one of the organizations I've worked with understand that, and I was assigned the task to lead an organization, production organization, over 2,000 employees. And this is what they were looking at. Interestingly, because they understand the element of culture, they were looking at accountability and ownership, they were looking at excellence, and they were looking at solidarity and sociability. And these were the kind of scores we were able to get in 9 months. And guess what? Literature will tell you that for you to transform an organization, you need about 3 to 5 years. But we're able to do this in 9 months. Just imagine having an organization where your staffs are accountable and they have a sense of ownership to the level of 90%. Their operational excellence, 85%. Solidarity and sociability, 86%. I think that's the kind of organization you want to build. And that's the kind of organization or the kind of brand that everybody wants to look up to. But then this is a different subject, different conversation for another day that we'll look into, right? So this is where I want to begin to draw the curtain, because I think I've given you the critical elements, right? I call it the crystal ball, which is the fact that branding is a subset of corporate identity, and corporate identity is made up of what? The strategy, your culture, and your visual identity. If you want to build a brand that plays at the top, There must be strong alignment with those three, and that is essentially how you convert value. Now, because I also realize that there's a lot of us here who are career professionals. We are not necessarily entrepreneurs, right? Or we are entrepreneurs, like they will say, right? And it's important that I also leave you with something. And I'm going to end this conversation because it's almost time as well with what I call the 12 non-negotiable elements every brand must have. And this pertains to both, not just personal brand, but even corporate brand. The 12 non-negotiable elements that every brand must have. I'm just going to run through it quickly. Number one, clarity. Every brand must have clarity. Clarity around your vision, your purpose, what you aim to do, and the likes. Every brand must have clarity. Number two, can you hear me? Just to be sure, is everybody with me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you can hear me, what was the last thing I said, please? Just to be sure you can hear me.
Hear me.
You said, can you hear me?
You said? All right. Number two, ecosystem. So your brand must have a specific ecosystem. Yeah, like they say, you can't be caught to the entire world. You just must have a focus. Your tribe. You must have your tribe, your ecosystem, your audience. Pretty much important. Number three, your brand must have a persona. So what is the person? What is the personality of your brand? Because those are the differentiating factor, really. What is the personality of your brand? Number four, your brand must have a clear value. What is the problem that you're solving and what is the value that you bring to the table? It must be crystal clear at every point in time. Who are you helping and how exactly are you helping them? It must be crystal clear. Number five, your brand must have visibility. But then it is visibility with positioning, the right positioning, which is number six. So your brand must be visible, but it must have the right positioning. So I'll give you an example. This is one that I love using a lot. If I do an evaluation of real estate companies and I put them on 4 quadrants and I try to diagnose their brand, the visual identity, how many of us have realized how the iconography of most real estate company is? If you look at their logos, if I put all their logos together, I'm going to cluster them in 1 quadrant. They all look alike. Everybody is saying the same thing. As a matter of fact, if you look at their marketing strategy, it's 5 minutes away from the airport, 2 minutes away from the city center. Everybody is saying the same thing, and they are sounding alike. That is not a problem. So a lot of time people go into those industry without proper brand positioning. And that is what we do even with our own personal brand. We sound like every other person in the office. And if you stand out like every other person and deliver like every other person, it makes it difficult for your name to be remembered. And what branding does is to help you rent a space in the head of your leader so much that when your leader is under obligation to produce results, he thinks about you from a responsibility point of view. And if you are being remembered when there's a lot, when it has to do with responsibility, you can be sure you'll be remembered when it has to do with reward. Except in some organizations where toxicity is the order of the day. All right, so I've talked about visibility and positioning. The next one is time guard. Every organization must have a time guard. It's an evolution. You must understand the evolutionary journey of your organization. That's why you realize that there are some brands. So I spoke to a lady, I ran into a lady at Transcorp in Abuja, beautiful lady, and she was into skin care. So you could tell by her look alone, she is the brand. But guess what? I told her, I said, there is a level you will grow this brand to. You need to dissociate your persona from the brand. The brand has to have an identity of its own. So much that the business does not need you to survive. Right now, the business needs you. You are the face of the brand. You are the representation of the brand. You are the brand ambassador. But a time will come when the business itself has to be its own brand ambassador. Because what will happen to you? You are going to age, your skin is going to wrinkle, you will not be a proper reflection of what you do any longer. And that is what happens to a lot of brands. So many brands get to a point where they need to evolve, but the leaders don't understand it. And before you know it, they start losing brand equity. So every brand must have a time guard. The next one, every brand must be humanized. The element of humanity. I've talked about that earlier when we started. Every brand must be humanized. People buy into brands when they are humanized. Warby Parker understands that when they rolled out buy one and get, or buy two and buy one and get one free, or buy two and donate one to an indigent person in Africa. People started buying their glasses because I bought personally. I've not worn it one day, but because of their brand strategy, I went into a Warby Parker shop and I bought glasses, $100 for no reason. I don't have eyes issue. I don't wear glasses, guys, but I bought it because of their brand and because the brand is humanized. Why? They came up with a campaign to say every time you buy a pair of our glass, you are donating one to an indigent person in Africa. That is what these days people are not interested in what you do. They are interested in the human that is at the end of your process. Who are you impacting? The next one, relationship. Brands must have strong relationship internally, relationship externally, relationship within your industry, relationship outside of your industry. That is how you grow into a global brand. You must cultivate and maintain healthy relationship within and outside of your industry. And of course, brand must have integrity. Nobody wants to deal with a brand that is not trustworthy. You must have integrity. And of course, the last two, every brand must have a service or a product. Every brand must have a service or a product. Every brand must have a service that you offer or a product. Ladies and gentlemen, with these few points of mine, knowing and realizing the fact that we cannot exhaust the subject of branding in 40 minutes, I want to believe that I've been able to convince you and not confuse you that branding is essential for your life. Even Paul understands that at some point he had to go into the University of Tyrannus to teach because there were certain clientele he needed to attract, and not until he got into their line of sight, he was not seen. I will yield the floor back to you, Bo. Thank you.
Wow. Guys, can I see a round of applause for Mr. Ben tonight? If you have enjoyed that presentation, I know that it was quite short. There was a lot that he wanted to unpack, but because this is a master class, it's a mastermind session, it's supposed to be an abridged presentation. He tried his best to at least give us the essentials, like he said, critical to our branding. Thank you, sir. I will be the first to ask a question. I have questions. I'm sure a lot of us have questions. This is the only time you can ask questions and get a response. After now, you can only watch the replay. So you are privileged to be in the room. Like he said, and he has told you, he has been privileged to work with a lot of very large institutions, and especially NLNG. He is the man behind the rebranding of NLNG, and he has been the advisor for a while now. So he is in a very good position to help you. My question, Ben, I am also a brand enthusiast, and I'm also in that industry. But I want to ask a question, even though I have an idea, but I mean, let's hear from you who's well versed. At what point do we? So, you know, one of the challenges I've encountered, even helping smaller brands, is that they have this notion that any brand they are building must be a reflection of who they are. And so some people find it very difficult to build something because they feel it's not them, because they want to look like it. And my question is it a must that every time we're building a brand, the brand must be an extension of our personality? Because, I mean, there's a lot of that body of knowledge that it should be an extension of the founder's personality, his hopes, his aspiration. What if, you know, because one of the last things you said is that it's important that we're able to differentiate our brand from ourselves, that our brand will have its own unique persona. What's the easiest way to build a brand, a solid brand that will not conflict with our personality? That's the word. Because some people will use Tony Elumelu and say, Tony Elumelu, when he was chairman, he's no longer chairman of UBA right now, but while he was chairman, he would always reflect chairman's, the UBA brand, the color. He would also do that for the Tony Elumelu Foundation. Now that he's now chairman of Seplat, that he has also, you know, started reflecting the brand of Seplat, and it will reflect on his colors and what he's wearing. If there are people here on the call who says, I really don't know how to blend with my brand's color. What's the simplest way to build a brand that has its own unique persona and you can still maintain your own persona without affecting the growth or the scalability of that brand? What can you say to that?
All right, fantastic. I think that's a very interesting question, very intriguing as well. The truth of the matter is, a lot of us don't realize that brands are living entity. That's the truth. So we don't realize that brands are living entity, and sometimes we treat them as assets, assets that are non-living. And as such, it's easy for you to just pass on your personality onto the brand, which is not bad in itself anyway. Now, if you want to build a brand that has a persona that is separate from who you are, and that's where branding comes. And that's why, I asked that question, which role is most important when it comes to the success of an organization? The truth of the matter is the most important role is your chief brand officer, because it is from the research, from the get-go, what do you want to achieve? How do you want to achieve it? What is the purpose of the organization? That will determine how the brand is going to be reflected, developed, designed, and structured, so that it takes that structure from the get-go. If your personality differs from the personality of the brand you are trying to build, you cannot be in forefront. You have got to look for a figure that represents that personality, and that figure because for every brand requires a personality to grow with, especially at the cradle. While you are starting, there must be a face to it, and that face has to take the personality of that brand. With time, you can then dissociate and have the brand stand on its own. So from the get-go, and that's why if you've already started your brand and you've been known, to be the face of that brand, and if your face or your personality does not align with the culture or with the persona that you want that brand to reflect, it's usually very difficult, because you've been known to be the face of the brand anyway from the get-go, and the brand is riding on your credibility from the beginning. From the onset, the brand has been riding on your credibility. So it's always very difficult. But if you have your chief brand officer on the table from the get-go, and those conversations ahead, the research is done, and we understand this is what we want to do, why you want to do it, this is the vision, this is the purpose, then we can then tell, okay, if this is what you want to do, clearly you are not the man to lead this. Then you have to now look for a well-curated personality that has the capability to drive that business, and to, at least for the first 5 to 10 years of that business, to be able to sustain, so that you have some level of brand equity before you can pull out. Because the truth of the matter is, if you're talking to me and I've not met you before, for instance, you are engaging me, the first thing, I'm judging your business by who I'm seeing. I'm judging you, and that's why a lot of time when leaders, business organizations have issues, reputational issues and all the rest, organizations are always very quick to kick them out, because it's going to impact the brand either directly or indirectly. It will impact the organization. So it's a thin line, but it's easier managed when the chief brand officer is brought to the table from the get-go and they can manage it. But it's possible, really. It's possible. It's a transition. One of the brands we work with, I will tell you, let me even share the story of Supreme Creations, which is now Bag of Ethics. Supreme Creations was created by the founder, and the founder is an Indian guy who had made a lot of money, worked with the UK government and all of that, and bought the entire production line. So he designs tote bags for Nike, Dior, top brands basically, and all of those. And when he got to a point where he was retiring, then he sent, of course, the daughter went to Harvard and graduated and came back, and she took the helm of affairs and took the industry in a different direction. This time around, she now introduced what they call the sustainability element. So for every bag that is produced by Supreme Creation, they have so every of their product that is produced under compliance with the UK government sustainability laws, they have a tag on it that carries Bag of Ethics. So they now had a brand confusion at some point, because Bag of Ethics now became very big. So is this Supreme Creation? Is it Bag of Ethics? We'll step in to correct. So it was one of the life issues that we had to deal with to solve that problem. And of course, what we did was a transition. It was developed a roadmap for them for 3 to 5 years transition, where we gradually killed the image of the founder, which is her dad, and projected the new entity bag of ethics without losing the brand equity. This is important because a lot of time when brands refresh, what they do, they refresh so far from who they used to are that they lose their identity, that people can't recognize them anymore. So it's as if they are starting from scratch, and that's where professionals come in. So you have to be able to refresh in such a way, or you have to be able to transit in such a way that you don't lose your brand equity. You transfer the equity, but then you assume a new position.
Okay, so Ben, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question because I'm hearing something that just triggered another area that I want a bit of clarity. So, what comes first? The expression of "don't put the cart before the horse." Do we create the brand and draw out the culture from what we've created, or do we create culture first and then create the brand out of the culture? It has been,
essentially, it's the brand. It's the brand that determines the culture. So the one is what kind of brand, and that's where there's a lot of research that in one of the sessions I had a brand consultant who had been working with other brand consulting for other brands, and by the time it was done, the guy said he doesn't even understand some of the scientific principle behind what he was doing. That he never saw it this way. By the time I showed him the 3 pillars: strategy, culture, and visual identity, he only understood visual identity. He never knew what all of this. So what he does is goes for organizations, they consult for them, design things for them without necessarily looking at some of the other critical elements. And they wonder why sometimes they just have a spike in performance and they plateau out. So what happens, it is the brand that determines what culture needs to go with it. And in looking at that brand, you have to look at so it begins with your strategy. Your strategy, then of course the culture that supports that strategy, then the visual identity is now the icing on the cake. But what usually happens a lot of time is people start with the strategy, then they go to the icing on the cake and they neglect the culture. Then they start wondering why they don't get the kind of results with all of the effort there, because your culture is not aligned. And most times your visual identity also will not be aligned. So the brand starts first. And that's why you see, we are not answering the question I asked now. At every point in time, your chief brand officer must be on the table from the get-go, because he is the guy who understands and will tell you how exactly every of those elements. This affects a lot of religious organizations that we have in this country. Let me use religious. A lot of churches in this organization, big churches are not, when it comes to brand compliance, it's zero. The reflection of their brand across the visual identity is zero. As a matter of fact, I've only seen one church in the UK that has that alignment, so much that even to the infrastructure, the walls, the building of the church is designed in compliance to the brand. The window is designed, the window huge is designed to the compliance. Every element you see is the consistency across, and that's why in branding, consistency is our number one focus. Because once there's a misalignment, you lose it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. Is there anyone else that wants to ask a question? Let's do like 2 more. Anybody else has a personal question you want to ask? You can unmute. Anybody with a question? Is there anybody?
Good evening. Good evening,
right.
sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. I hope I'm very audible.
Yes, you are, my carry.
All right. So thank you so much, Mr. Ben. Thank you, Emo, for this amazing session. So I have a question, sir. When you talked about how it is important for every one of us to have a brand whereby you don't put yourself, in the sense that, let's say you're trying to build a brand for your business like an entrepreneur, and you also have your own personality that you are trying to showcase once in a while. So now the question I'm trying to now is that, for instance, now I'm an entrepreneur and I'm multi-skilled, whereby I have like 4 to 5 different services that I render. Now, that lately I started narrowing it down to one particular brand, which is the public speaking and the alaga of a thing. Then so on my LinkedIn or my social media handle, I'm trying to like create a brand that resonates with that particular niche that I want to be known for. So, but sometimes I usually tend to post about maybe my little wins, my little achievements, my like something that I do day to day sometimes. Now, can we call this like a misconception of branding? Because I don't know if you get what I'm saying, because I'm trying to put my own personal things out there, and I'm
I
trying to
get you
also.
clearly. I get you clearly. Go ahead. I get you.
All right, so that's the question, sir.
All right, so you're not alone. That's what I say. I hear this a lot, and really, that's a pure branding issue. If your branding is done properly, any platform I go to, once I see it, without having a conversation with you, I should be able to tell what you do and what value you create. So the moment I'm confused, today you're posting about X, tomorrow you're posting about Y, Z, then it becomes an issue. That's the misalignment. So what you do, so I'll use myself as an example. I think I'm like you too. I've got different parts, right? So I'll use my platform. So I have my public speaking part, I have my leadership work, I have my work on branding. My work on branding goes on my Facebook. My work on leadership goes on my LinkedIn. Sometimes I touch a bit of branding because you sometimes it's difficult to divulge, to separate leadership or talk about leadership without talking about branding, or talking about branding without talking about leadership. I try to do that. And of course, my public speaking bit of it, I do it on my website. So you must be able to delineate, sometimes it's difficult to totally separate it. But if you look at it, if you scroll through, you're able to tell, oh, this is 90% more of branding. This is 90% more of public speaking. This is 90% more of leadership. So it's easy for you to be able to create that. So that's what you do. Now, because I think your question is two in one. In terms of the organization, what usually happens, like I said, at the start, at the beginning, it can be difficult, especially if you are the one running it and you don't have the resources to get somebody in. You just have to take it on. But you must know when to begin to pull back and let people or the team that is responsible take charge of that, and you are providing that support or the leadership from behind, such that your persona does not conflict with the persona of the organization that you're trying to create, basically. I hope that answers the question.
All right.
Yeah, but to some extent.
Oh, okay. Can I hear the other part of it, please? That's why we're here. Quickly.
All right, sir. To some extent, sir. I apologize for So
No.
I was saying, like now, what do you advise somebody that is just going? Like said, you should have team that's responsible for that. So what should you not? What should you advise? Like, what do you advise for somebody like us that is a small scale for now entrepreneur and that
So
also
let's
needs
get
to.
Let's get more specific now. Give me an example. I think this requires specificity. Let's get more specific. So for you now,
Okay, okay.
what's yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, I get what you're saying. Okay, now so I usually have like companies that I did courses and I post about my courses or my reflections on my accounts and my
Which
pages.
account
Then I'm also
specifically?
trying to push my Alaga brand.
Which
So I'm
account
always
specifically
posting
that?
so all the three accounts that I have, the LinkedIn, the Instagram, and the Facebook. So anything I post on my LinkedIn, I'm posting them across the
Oh,
Instagram
across
and
the
Facebook too.
platforms.
Yes, sir.
All right, so
So
that's
I'm always
essential.
have.
So what I'm saying is you have to create a dedicated account for the new ideology that you want to push.
Wow.
You have to create it. Because just imagine this. I'm looking for someone to do the Alaga, for instance. And I go to your website or your whichever platform, and I see 5 posts on different things. One post on Alaga, then in another, I see another 7, I see one. At some point, I'm wondering, where are you, right? It's the same thing with some persons who try to project themselves as thought leaders, but you don't have a niche. So today you're talking about politics, tomorrow you're talking about finance, next tomorrow you're talking about religion. You must have a niche. And remember what I said about those 12 non-negotiable. You must have your tribe, you must have your audience, you must have your ecosystem. It must be clear nobody should be confused. When I come to your page, or I must be clear, this is what you do. There shouldn't be any confusion. So you have to create a dedicated page where you speak more. It's not as if you cannot speak up about other things, but on that page, it's going to be 90% of that conversation. Every other thing will be lesser. And other, so that way you have a dedicated standalone platform for each of the conversation that you have. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's very great. Thank you, sir. There's a question on the chat. Let me just read it so that you can hear. Let me take Abimbola. Abimbola says, as a corporate person looking into carving a niche in a particular client, how do you brand? How do you make sure that you develop yourself into being a brand and putting yourself out there? This is from Abimbola.
All right, so Abimbola, I think this is where it gets interesting. Can we allow Abimbola speak a little bit just to throw more light? So this is you now. Which sector or industry are you in, and which sector are you trying to go into, or which niche are you trying to go into? Just throw a little more light into it so that the answers just addresses the issue directly.
Bimbo, do you want to unmute and speak? Maybe is that better for you? Okay, while she's still doing that, there's another question that says.
Okay, go ahead, please.
There's another question that's almost similar. It says, if you were to build a personal brand today, what strategic approach would you take to ensure it plays at the top?
At the top. All right. So we've talked about the 12 non-negotiable elements. I think that is key. You must have all of those clearly. But where you begin from, it's basically the subject of purpose. Just give me 1 minute, please. A minute, please. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
So you have to begin with the element of clarity. Let me try and attempt the two questions that you just asked, Abimbola. And so I started off my career in production. I was basically a technical guy. I was an industrial and laboratory analyst, and that was what I was doing. But then I wanted to pivot, right? I wanted to pivot into corporate communications or any other part of the business. The first thing I need to do is to reflect the future that I'm seeing. Right? I need to be able to prove to the decision makers that, look, I've got what it takes to play in that space. So what I started doing was first look for my voice. What is my message? Right? What is that value that I'm taking into that space? And I realized that my strongest voice at that time was my knowledge around the subject of purpose. A lot of people don't have the clarity of purpose and the sense of direction. So the first thing that I did was to put together all of my thoughts, constellated my thoughts, and I started testing my thoughts with people that were very, very intelligent, right? I started listening to people that had gone ahead of me, the likes of FD, right? The likes of Uncle Jimmy, everybody that had done stuff. And I started testing and I realized that, I've got something of value here. Then I published my book. Now, in publishing my book, strategically, I invited all of the top decision makers in my organization to the book launch. And of course, it wasn't this is a book that I've had people who were working on their thesis in Harvard write me, and they bought copies of my book to contribute to their body of work. So it was a body of work that I knew my blood and sweat went into. It wasn't just writing any book, it was a book that made impact. So I wrote that book, and that became first my repository of knowledge. Then it gave me an authority in that area. Then within my business, I started looking for initiatives, projects, tasks that does not necessarily relate to my job description. And I started volunteering. So what I did was, there were a lot of things about leadership, because leadership was also my other area that also came in. And I started taking trainings and all of that in leadership. And I started offering and volunteering. It wasn't too long before I became a known name, a household name. It was so good that there is no essential at some point, technically across the entire organization, different departments want to do things. They are looking for a resource person. They speak to me first. Because at some point, I then was playing in the circle of all of the resource persons that, so I basically have everybody's number. So you can imagine when at some point in my department, we wanted to talk about teamwork. Imagine me bringing in Sunday Ulisse to come and tell the story of the Atlanta 96 victory, how the team that is made up of people who were graduates and people who were illiterates could work together to win such a prize, or to win such a trophy, Atlanta, you needed to be in that meeting. But I could only do that because I had shown that I was a person of value, and beyond that, every time you give me the opportunity to speak, I will always bring value to the table. So it was first about understanding what was my voice. My voice was the subject of purpose. My voice was the subject of leadership. Then I needed to create a product that shows I'm an authority in that. Then I have to write a book. It might not be the same for everybody. You don't have to write a book, right? But it could be any other thing. It could be you creating a content. It could be you creating, because what a lot of us don't even understand is what we carry requires us to play outside of the environment that we play in, not just within the environment. So the environment is even limiting us. So a lot of time we are sort of caging and putting a lead on our potential and what we can achieve by virtue of just looking within the circumference of our environment. So why the environment where you find yourself is essentially actually a test ground for you to launch. It's not your real boat. It's actually a test ground for you to launch. So it's about finding your voice, understanding what is your strength, and using that as a tool to then reflect. Then when it got to the point where there were now opportunities in the new areas I wanted to go to, by the time I was speaking to people, the conversation was not whether I should go there. The conversation was about when. Because it became clear to everybody that this guy has got what it takes to play in that space. So there was no doubt about it. Right? There was no, in short, it got to a point where it was even HRO that is trying to convince the leaders that this is where this guy should be. Because we see him do more of this without necessarily dropping the ball where I am, you see. So I had to also deliver on the responsibility and the task where I am, but then show clearly that I could deliver for the with respect to the responsibility that will be handed over to me in the new area that I'm going to. So I think that helps to sort of address some of the questions that or the two questions basically, yeah. But
Yes,
then I will also leave my number. I'm sure this conversation can also go on. I also mentor people on personal branding, of course, coaching, and of course, helping to consult when it comes to enterprise branding as well, corporate identity. Yeah.
All right, I'll just take this last question. I think you can just answer it in, 3 minutes. Ogbonna is saying, how can we curb brand piracy? Most times, someone out there is hijacking ideas. Can we secure our brands and achieve a franchise? She says that she's a motivational speaker and a content creator. Yeah, so in 2 minutes, what can you say that?
All right. The subject of brand piracy, I think this is one that is everywhere. People will pirate. I think the first thing it does for me is, I mean, if you just few days ago, a few weeks ago, I had my website hacked. I had to get the guys to get it back. So, if it happens, one, what it shows you that first you are doing the right thing. It means you've got value. It means that you are headed in the right direction and you just want to intensify. The other bit of it, I've also known that a lot of people can copy what they see, but they can't copy the energy that generated that idea. They can't copy the creativity that generated that idea. They might look like it, but one of the ways that you break that is consistency. What usually happens a lot of time is the guy who copies become much more consistent than the guy who owns it fades out. And the guy who copies it tend to look like is the original owner of the idea. You just have to be consistent. And of course, by legal standing, if there are every element of your work that you need to trademark, please do it. So that is also very important. So you want to trademark every element of your job or every element of your brainchild, such that if anybody does that, you have a legal ground to also take that on and of course press charges against them. But clearly, it's not something you can run away from. It's not something you can avoid totally. It will always happen. Sometimes people do it out of admiration for your work. When I published my book, someone called me up where somebody took the cover page and reprinted a new cover page and put it on it and started selling it. So you can imagine that. So it's something that happens, yeah. All right, thanks.
All right, thank you
Back to
very much.
you.
Please let us say a big thank you to Mr. Ben. He has tried. He has said he has a mentorship platform. So I'll ask him for details and I will get the details to share with the community. Someone was asking, can we get the slides? Well, I will speak to Mr. Ben if he will be gracious to share the slides he can, and we'll share it with members of the community. If you're not part of us, it's very easy. Just go to our website, apply for membership. Very straightforward, and then we'll add you to our platform. We get things like this for free, mentorship access, resources, and things like that. So, Mr. Ben, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. The link to become a member is on the chat. Please make sure you apply to be a member. Very easy. We welcome everybody to be part of our growing community. Before we go, we always have an opportunity to spotlight somebody who is building something and that we want everybody to be a part of. Ms. Simeon, are you still here? Simeon, let me know you are available to speak. 3 minutes. I want to give you 3 minutes to just share what you're building.
Okay.
Simeon is here. Okay, so Simeon, very quickly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, speak loudly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really do appreciate. So straight to the point, my name is Simon. I'm a software engineer and I'm the CEO of OSC Finder, right? So the whole idea of my tech platform or my tech company is solving the marketing issues with the use of tech. So I built a platform that makes it easy for you to find verified business companies,